This presentation is called Why Does Aotearoa New Zealand Need a Sovereign National Data Infrastructure, and What Would It Take to Get There? We're hearing from Doug Dixon, who's going to present a real-world path forward. Doug is... I'm missing a bio for Doug. Sorry, Doug. But I will introduce you. Doug is an expert on this work. He's been a co-author on a research paper, which this is based on, and has worked in a range of roles around government and the private sector in New Zealand. And he's an advocate for New Zealand Inc. and very passionate about this topic. So welcome on up, Doug, wherever you are. Yes. If you need the gloves or the safety goggles.
Thank you, Chris. I do feel a bit underprepared and underdressed, but thank you.
They're just down here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for the great introduction. Inga mana, inga reo, inga karangatanga maha. Tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Ko Doug Dixon, tōku ingoa. Again, thanks for the introduction, and I'm very excited to be here. I don't know if any of you guys know too much about the history of Govis, but it was first, well, it's 35 years old, but in 2007 it first became an incorporated society under the brand name of Govis. Just 19 years ago, which I believe makes this Govis 19. Oh. Yeah. Got you.
1993.
1990. Oh.
Yeah.
Check Google. 2007. Good. So anyway, it is early, and as Chris has said, you probably haven't had enough coffee. Well, you won't be able to get any for a little while, but hopefully soon. Conferences, I find, are a little bit like a fire hose of information. There's so much interesting stuff being talked about, so much going on, and I will try to be relatively kind to you. Unfortunately, I do have a few slides, and if I hear enough sort of talking or booing, then I'll sort of fast forward through those. People do only tend to recall a few points from each talk, so if I do come across any during this talk, will be sure to let you know. But I wanted to start by recalling some themes that I've been digesting from yesterday, and starting with Sir Brian Roche. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this name. Does anyone know? Roche. Thank you. So Sir Brian set the tone for the conference, and just a few key points were digital government not being about technology, but being about people, and being honest about where we are, clear about what we need to change, and making services that actually work for New Zealanders. He talked about the need to stop making organisational boundaries the customer experience, and to build common foundations and agreed standards. Hopefully my talk is going to weave into this narrative. We heard from Pia Andrews, and she talked about a digital public infrastructure, which is part of her public sector transformation stack. And we also heard from Jeremy Weir from GDDA, talking about identity and credentials. So this talk is about the kind of foundational data infrastructure that underpins both of those visions. And so it's a beautiful piece of the puzzle, I think, that not only fits, but it was arrived at independently via some research. And it's perfectly aligned with our new digital identity services legislation, or DISTF. So we'll come into that soon. All right. Let's move on. So what are we going to cover today? Bit of background. So we're going to talk about the history. Sounds like a lecture. The history of computing paradigms, and how we have kind of got to a stage in our evolution where we've broken the internet, and that's really the reason why we need a national data infrastructure, because we've kind of broken the way things are today, and we've gone as far as we possibly can without a major reshuffle being needed. Talk about some challenges, and we've had those challenges and frustrations bubble up from previous speakers already in this. So some of the major things that are causing pain in our system. And then I'll talk about the national data infrastructure. So why do we need a national data infrastructure? As I said, it's because we broke the the current paradigms, broke the way the internet kind of works, and the huge amounts of data and processing that now take place mean that we need to change. But to answer the question properly, we've got to start with a bit of context, a bit of history. Who likes history? Okay, who remembers mainframes? Give me a whoop whoop. Yeah, mainframes, amazing rooms, unimaginable power, owned by the most powerful companies and governments on earth. And today's digital world, has come about through a couple of swings and roundabouts. So we did have these mainframes. That got kind of destroyed by the personal computer revolution, which decentralized computing effectively for quite some time. Everyone had their local data. They bought apps. They run their apps on their local data. But then they got connected up again into this magical thing called the internet. And the internet is, when you think about it, dominated by cloud providers and centralized software as a service, platform as a service providers. And does that sound a bit like mainframes again? Come full circle. And so they all promote centralization of data and processing and control. So the internet is now effectively a network of mainframes. Here's a fun slide. What is our, and again, Sir Brian Roche, let's be real about where we are today. So the data landscape in New Zealand in 2026, as it was in 2025 and 2024, we do have this continuing explosion in digital services, and data is siloed in single huge troves of data where the processing is also co-located. And that means that to provide services using sensitive information, all of that sensitive information is co-located with everyone else's. And that goes all the way down something called the digital supply chain. So if you are in the public service and you have services running, they will not be running entirely on platforms that you own and control, but will be composed from various services provided all throughout the world. And to keep things topical, we heard a new phrase recently from our Prime Minister, who I think last week in a pre-budget speech said that international relations are moving from an economic focus to one dominated by security concerns. Competition now means cyber attacks, disinformation, supply chain coercion, and grey zone operations are primary tools of statecraft. So supply chain coercion, remember that phrase. That's quite disturbing, I think, given the platforms on which we base our public service. So, look, in our new geopolitical climate, the risks that we have known about for quite some time, but kind of ignored, have finally got a bit too close for comfort. And what are the sort of implications of this in terms of data? So, our data system is a little bit sick. Sir Brian talked about having to repeat credentials all the time, tell the same story to other people. It's not just that; it's that we collect too much data whenever we interact with consumers. We demand to see things like passports, or we ask for dates of birth and gender and all kinds of things when seemingly you don't need to know that. There is a more disturbing trend of this kind of idea of forced trust. People being forced or have little or no control about whether they interact with a digital platform because it is the only supported way of achieving something. And as public servants, we have to think hard about that because we serve the public, whoever they are and however they interact with us. I've written identity oligopoly there, and that is referring to the idea that to prove who you are, there's a very small number of ways you can do that typically these days. Often it's via one of the big platforms. So you can have the idea that you can log in with Facebook or log in with Google or Microsoft. That happens with all of your emails, by the way, when you use M365. So not everybody has or wants to use one of those accounts in the public. And so that's an interesting problem that we've got there too. Māori impact. So, is a lack of consent and control, sometimes in identity, and that goes against the principles of Māori data sovereignty. And as we know, Māori data is not always used to help Māori needs or aspirations. So there is a bit of concern about how linked government data could be used. So I want to show you an example. Stuff quiz. Who loves the stuff quiz? Give me a whoop whoop. Come on. All right, so, but it's a pain that you have to sign into, or at least you did. Do you have to still? I don't know. Yeah, so this says, yeah, what do we, oh, small value exchange. You want something from me? Okay, for a quiz, sure, I'll do it. What's this? Last name, email, really? Choose a password. Country, date of birth, gender, postcode. Wow, don't worry, your information is safe. Yeah. I'll disclose some of this data to, wow, the Philippines, Australia, the US, other third parties, China, India, Singapore. Cool. Oh, wait a minute. There's a bit more. So this is, I'm not singling out necessarily stuff as being particularly egregious, but it's just a really common pattern that you see this huge excessive sharing of data and collection of data. How do we solve that? Well, we can look for inspiration in other jurisdictions, which is a really sensible thing to do. We have European data spaces. They've got the same problems that the rest of the world has, okay? And they are enormously well, resourced compared to New Zealand, and they're also a lot more complicated. But they're dealing with some of the same issues. What their approach is to look at strategic sectors and try and get to some common data infrastructure and governance frameworks. And that's really what we're talking about here. Data pooling, access, sharing. But it's an absolute juggernaut. The EU is huge, and they have way more complexity to deal with than we do in New Zealand. So what we really need is a solution that works for Aotearoa New Zealand and does not simply import European solutions that embed European values. Where else can we look? An amazing piece of work here from Te Kahura Raunga, which is the Māori data governance model. I encourage you all to download and have a read of this. It's brilliantly written, it's articulate, and it's got a lot of wisdom in it. And it's a detailed guide, and it's designed for the public service, to help the public service make decisions to uphold Te Tiriti responsibilities and actively protect Māori data as taonga. It is a great document, and I'll pick out a few things from it I have done here. So data infrastructure should work for Māori, and it's a theme that we're going to hear more about today. Māori should be involved as shared decision makers. And of course, I mean, it hardly needs saying, but it does. An interesting architectural piece of guidance is that data infrastructure should be distributed and decentralized. And that challenges the silo model big time. And that's the circle that we need to square. Is that right? That we need to work out in our heads how that could possibly work. And what do you get if you do that, if you decentralize and distribute identity and access and credentials? Well, you get more autonomy. So we'll see a bit more about that soon. Okay. So finally, national data infrastructure. Okay, so what is it? It's basically a new set of identity and data services. As I said, it does tie in precisely to what we heard from Jeremy yesterday and to what we heard from Pia yesterday. This is not in contradiction to those guys, but it's more about how would we build the things that you're saying that you need in order to achieve big transformation in how government data works and how we process that data works. So identity and data services offered by a range of public and private sector organizations. Yeah, it's more than just a government system. It's not a government system. It's a set of agreed standards that are New Zealand specific, New Zealand wide. So there are some bullets there. I don't need to go through all of those line by line. But really, it's more like a platform, some rules of the road, a single market for data in the terminology of European data spaces. It's supposed to be neutral and secure and eventually it'll fade into the background. And I think that's one of the, I think from yesterday somebody said, if you can't see it, it's doing its job. If things are easy and you don't notice them, then they're doing their job. So yeah, it's much like other infrastructure. Everyone uses the internet every day, right? Well, the idea here is that national data infrastructure would be something people use every day to easily identify themselves, to prove things to organizations and others when they need to. We do need rules to keep everybody safe. And it helps us to do things better and faster. Here's the other thing, and another thing from yesterday is, to start with, it's a massive, great big investment, and it gets a whole lot of attention when it's being built. But as I said, afterwards, everyone takes it for granted, and that's a good thing. What does it do? What is this thing? So there are 5 bullets there, and they are actually the sort of the 5 parts of the architecture of the national data infrastructure. The first two of those, identity and sharing data with others in a trusted way, both of those are envisaged by the legislation that we have in the form of DISTF, D-I-S-T-F, for our wonderful transcriber. And so those are foundational things. You need to be able to prove who you are to a system, so that you can then potentially assert and prove facts about yourself, maybe your age, maybe a permission you have, maybe a license. Okay, and then there are some further capabilities of a national data infrastructure which are not yet envisaged in legislation. So controlling of access to data, enabling data owners to authorize trusted access to data sets held by third parties. So for example, a person might grant a health insurance company limited access to their medical records held by a GP. That would be something that you can't necessarily do today, because the data is already there. Okay, it's already escaped. The genie has escaped the bottle. The next one down the line is around controlling storage of data. And in the future, a fairly common paradigm will be having users able to store data themselves in an online store that they, and only they, control and can access, instead of digital services having copies of their data. And you can see immediately how that breaks apart the idea that you have to have a silo of data. It does not have to be that way. For many types of data, it simply doesn't have to be that way. It is for convenience and for economical reasons. But it doesn't scale up, because you get the kinds of problems that we've seen over and over. And finally, controlling of processing of data. So this is building on the previous parts of the foundation, where potentially you can have data processed in a mutually trusted, secure environment where no other party can even see the data. Okay? So for example, a home loan comparison site where a user's bank statements are processed by each loan provider's assessment code in a third-party environment. The data is then destroyed forever, but the results are returned so a decision can be made. Okay, so all of these things become possible as we layer up the data infrastructure. So, again, echoing people from yesterday, this doesn't happen overnight. It can't happen overnight. It would bankrupt the world if we tried to do this overnight. We can't. We have to gradually get there. And what we've been talking about is decoupling data from processing. That's one of the key points here. They don't have to be all in the same place, because with that huge amount of ability to access all the data all at once come the kinds of problems that we need to solve. So this is good for people. Consumers read citizens, if you like. Reclaiming data, you can start to control, as a citizen, some of the data which you should be able to control. You should be able to control access to that data and grant it appropriately to only the right bits of information that you want to share, to only the people that you want to share it with, for only the amount of time they need it for. Really key to this, this talk is choice of providers. So In a national data infrastructure, there is no compulsion that that an identity provider or a service provider must be in the public domain, public sector, or a private sector, or it might be iwi-based, or community-based, or school-based. Okay, and so you can see how very, very neutral the idea of this infrastructure is. Although it says the talk is national data infrastructure, please don't think that means national government or any other sort of connotation. It's New Zealand's data infrastructure. Okay. What about you guys as organisations? You hold huge amounts of sensitive data. Is that a risk? It's an enormous risk. Sometimes you do want and need that data to do your jobs. Sometimes you're just holding an axe above your head by holding all this data in one place, often in plain text. And even if it's encrypted, someone's got the keys, and it's not always you. Okay, and so there's these huge risks. The other thing that was talked about yesterday was duplication of effort. And what we can do is by standardizing on protocols and norms and patterns of data interchange and data design and security design, we can remove all of this duplication of everyone coming up with their own way of doing identity and their own way of doing access control and all of this crazy stuff that loads of clever people are spending all their time reinventing. And when you introduce something as quite dramatically different as what we're talking about here, it unlocks a big innovation opportunity. Digital wallets, just being the most obvious and simple one. Who can make the digital wallet with the best user experience, the best customer experience? And there are lots of who can provide a consumer-centric data storage that could be used in the data infrastructure. Lots and lots of potential for innovation across the economy and the public sector. Here's an example. So today, Aotearoa is applying for a job, but she needs to prove that she is allowed to work in New Zealand. So the employer asks for her passport, which she scans. Off it goes into the employer. They've got, and then they store it. And where does it go? Into their various systems they've got, which are hosted in various clouds, controlled by various countries. Who knows where that goes, really? Do they really need the passport? Not really. All they need is to hear from DIA that Aotearoa is who she says she is, and that she does have the right to work in New Zealand. So there is a flow here where Aotearoa proves she enters her credentials, potentially backed with a biometric or liveness check, gets a verifiable credential, again, referenced yesterday, same standard, which is then presented to the employer, can easily verify that with DIA, and off she goes. So, this breach was disclosed, and this is the Manage My Health breach, was disclosed in late December 2025 and involved the exfiltration of hundreds of thousands of medical documents related to 120,000 patients. Would it have been prevented, or at least made much less likely by adoption of national data infrastructure? Yes, if implemented as intended. It's a perfect example of why data silo architecture is dangerous. If you have the data, if you can access it at all, then somebody else will figure out how to. Zero trust and zero knowledge are the opposite approach to this, and that's what the NDI supports. I've only got a couple of minutes left, I've been told, so I'll skip through data through the legislation. Briefly, legislation supports exactly what I'm talking about here. Happy. So, what's this about? It's about letting go a bit. It's about empowering our citizens, trusting our citizens with their data, respecting our citizens. I think and again, it's been referenced, if we try to force people into a system, it's very likely there's going to be resistance. And a small note about digital inclusion. Digital inclusion does not automatically increase social inclusion. So, Brian said, courage to deliver also means courage to include. and keeping real support for people who need it. So we need our constituents to have the courage to be delivered to. And courage, in a system requires the system to promote psychological safety. So we can't expect everyone to suddenly jump on board with cool ideas just because we like them. We're going to need to give people time and space. Luckily, we don't deliver these things incredibly fast anyway. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. But most importantly, we do need to make sure that people do need choice. If you don't have choice, that's not the kind of society that we want to be building. Cool. And I think that probably takes me to a good point in time. Does it, Chris?
Well, thank you very much, Doug. That was great. We've got questions coming through on Slido, so keep these coming. And if we could please jump to the Q&A on the screen, that would be wonderful. So first up, which of the 5 pillars that you mentioned in the NDI do you think New Zealand needs to prioritise? Are there any being ignored currently?
Yeah, they have to be built in order. So the first one, identity, needs to be built first. Everything else sits on top of that.
Excellent. Next one. What's to stop companies from just copying your data and storing those copies instead?
The long arm of the law is one. A second one is if we make it easy not to hold data, then people will tend not to want to, because the reputational damage and the real human damage only comes when you hold data you shouldn't really be holding on to. But yeah, the reality is it's very hard to stop people copying stuff. I don't have all the answers to that.
Yep. And then the very last one, I think, given the neutrality of the NDI concept, without an owning institution, how do we get it started? Who's going to build it or govern it?
I think it needs to be bootstrapped with industry verticals. Healthcare would be great, wouldn't it, Chris? Do you want to take the lead on that? Thank you very much. But who needs to own it? I think it has to have a government lead to make sure that there is a relatively level playing field. I think it's very, very dangerous if we let industry run off and say, ta-da, here is what it is, and then we look under the hood and go, that looks suspicious, right? We don't really want that. What we want is something that this country has signed off on, that it knows and trusts is safe. So,
Yep. Thanks, Doug.
Sure.